Hello and welcome to an impromptu video in response to Dead Meme Gaming's video there the other day about the monetization and the toxic traits of the gaming industry and the way things are going now. I'm actually from the same generation as Dead Meme, and I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago when it all first kicked off. I've had Commodores and Ataris, and I think my first was actually a Nintendo. The the NES system was my first ever console. I remember when I was about 5 years old playing Duck Hunt. Those were good times because the games were actually complete, and they were more complete. They were more thought was put into them. They were kind of works of art back then. They weren't regurgitated tripe that's been done 100 times because someone wants to make money and no other reason. It was made by people who were making them because they were good at it, because they enjoyed it, and because they were trying to do something fun and unique and special. Now, like in them days, they actually had people paid to sit there and replay levels over and 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 over again, looking for bugs. These were called game testers. There was actually a career in testing video games. Now that role's moved on to the likes of early access. Now, not to hate on the early access, because yes, I agree with Dead Meme, it does carry risks because you don't know whether that game's actually going to get to completion. It might not look anything like it did when you bought it. There's a whole number of things that could make it bad, but like I remember Oxygen Not Included, a very good game. I highly recommend it. It does have DLC. The DLC was early access technically when I got it, I think. I'm not even sure. The game itself is still, yeah. I got it for on sale now. Will only now buy DLC if it's really cheap on sale. Um, I'll come back to the DLC in a second though, because early access, I want to just stick to that for a second. I like it because when it's done right, like Satisfactory, it gives us the ability to shape the game as it's growing. So we get to give ideas, we get to give feedback. Okay, we're doing the role of bug testing for game companies, which is a bad thing. But in return, we should be getting it at a cheaper rate than when it's at full release. Um, the thing with you've touched on stationeers. Now, this footage you're seeing here over the voice is actually from my next video. I'm putting out a bit of a montage from work I've been doing on my base on Mars. Now, I agree that, and I've said this myself on live stream in the past, that having DLC for an early access game is ridiculous. It's stupid. It shouldn't be allowed. I can understand that the devs want to make money, and we all want to make money. Like, we have all got to survive. I get that. But when it's in early access, you're dead right. It's alpha state. Not shouldn't be. You should not be releasing DLC. Maybe make it so that people who buy into the early access get the DLC for free, and then when it becomes a fully fledged game that's released 1.0 plus, then make it DLC. Maybe. Like I don't. Right. It helps devs early access, and it gives people a chance to get out their hands on games earlier, like Satisfactory. That's been done brilliantly. Like, it's still not a full release. People are beta testing, as it were, but they know it and they keep people updated. And it's a great game. I love the game. I'm not going to get into a playthrough until the map's finished. I don't care so much about the recipes. People have had to rework entire factories because they've reworked recipes and stuff. Can kind of live with that, but I think they are a shining example of how to do early access. Now, on to DLC. Personally, I have a huge problem with DLC that alters the game mechanics. Now, that applies to City Skylines, Surviving Mars, etc. Like RimWorld being the most shining example of a game that is fleecing people with their DLC. €15 to buy the base game, €15 for expansion packs. There's now free expansions on top. So that's another €45 on top. Hold on, now we're looking at a AAA rated game price. I don't even buy AAA rated games like anymore. I only do really indie and early access at the moment, with the occasional thing like Surviving Mars from Paradox. I like a lot of Paradox's games, but I hate their business model, so I'm not going to involve myself with the company anymore. I've decided whatever I've got from them is enough. I've seen there's a Surviving the Apocalypse. I won't buy it. I'm not going to buy it. Just not happening. I did go for the DLC for Surviving Mars purely because I wanted to complete the maximum difficulty challenge again. But then if they bring out another DLC, they're going to try and milk me for more money, and I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it again. I'm sorry, but if you want to release updated mechanics for a game, you bring out another game. You do number 2, and you don't just do a few mechanical changes. You give us a whole new game with tweaks and improvements that make it worth buying the game. Like City Skylines is basically SimCity. I'd say SimCity 4, really, really, really watered down, and then all the DLC's been put on at great expense. You're looking at over €100 for a game. Now, I would pirate it, except for bugs and viruses, basically. Otherwise, I've got a copy of the base game and 2 or 3 expansion packs. I would, within a heartbeat, if I could trust the source, download a crack copy and enjoy the game that I bought. I hate the fact that games can just drop game breaking, game altering mechanics on their customers without a warning. And so I'm watching a really good YouTuber, another Irish YouTuber. I'm half Irish myself. He's an Irish guy called Francis John, does RimWorld and Oxygen Not Included, and a few other ones, even Kenshi's in there. He's really good, and he's a great entertainer. I watch his stuff a fair amount, and I'm watching his RimWorld playthrough now, looking at all of these abilities which should be in the base game. And I'm using RimWorld as a prime example because there's at least 20 mods, at least, probably more like 30 or 40, that I have to install just to make the base game fun, playable. And it's still vanilla, so it's things like having a heat map, it's things like not having your pawns being interrupted when someone walks through the door or something, and better hauling, and just quality of life, improving the mechanics, improving the UI, and basically even the mods, like a mod manager to manage the mods. Now, the modding community on RimWorld has done amazing work keeping that game alive. And a lot of the ideas for the expansion packs, guess what? It came from the mods. Now, Ludian Studios, whatever his name, is trying to milk their customers for more money again, which, we're looking at this from an adult perspective. I remember when I was young, we're from the same generation. I remember getting on the bus, going into town, picking up a physical box with a physical cartridge or disc, depending on what era. And all right, you had peripherals, memory cards, and stuff like that you had to buy as well. But when you bought the game, you bought a physical game. You could take that and give that to a friend. You could say, here, borrow that, see what you think. You could sell it back to the same shop that you bought it from secondhand. And the only way I could keep up with playing video games when I was younger was the secondhand market. I don't think I've ever been queuing up for a first day release of a game ever in my life. And even now with DLC and internet access with downloading games and internet access, I still have never pre-ordered or gone straight for a new game. Like I say, most of the stuff I do nowadays is in early access or it's indie anyway. But gone are the days when we had a physical thing that was ours and we could do with it as we want to. Now the thing is, Steam have these terms and conditions. Now, what happens if Valve goes bust? What happens if some bigwig at Valve makes a really stupid move and they suddenly lose a lot of money and have to shut up shop? What's happening to all of our DRM games? What happens if there's an apocalypse and the internet goes down? I'm kind of being silly here, but what happens if there's some major blackout from the internet and we're without connection for months on end? Because I know that there's an offline mode, but I know that after a while it will make you connect back up to the servers. Speaking of connecting to servers, you can go and see live graphs of how many people are playing what game and how many hours they've got. That data is gold for big corporations, not for little game publishers per se. I mean, they can get useful information, yes, anyone can, but for the big corporations, that is a gold mine of data, and we're just throwing it at them. Now, 9 times out of 10, I'll play offline anyway, but they do incentivize it with things like badges and or not badges on it's badges were on Congregate before it was a thing. Microsoft and the rest of them took over the same idea, or took on the same idea, should I say? Um, but you get where I'm coming from. Like, there's a real danger in uploading your saves to the cloud when you don't know who might be looking at that and what for. Like, big companies, a lot of the people who work in them, they don't have any ingenuity. They're brain dead, and they depend on other people's work to make anything actually happen. Like, most of the richest people didn't do the job themselves. They paid someone else to do it, and then got famous off their work. I actually remember, going slightly off topic, when I was young, school took us to Pizza Hut to design a pizza, and I designed, basically, I didn't call it the Four Seasons, but it was a pizza with four different segments that could been, you'd have two slices of four different toppings, however you wanted. And then lo and behold, about, I don't know, a year later, the Four Seasons became a thing. Now, I can't say conclusively that that was linked, but just as an example of how corporations use the ingenuity and imagination of other people to make their own wares sellable, let's say. So yeah, we can't. The second-hand game market's now gone, dried up. All of them. I remember those shops before CEX or GameStop or GameStation or any of them big ones came along over here in Europe. There were small independent guys that would buy and sell before it became mainstream, because it was very much a nerdy thing to be a gamer. Now it's a lot more mainstream. But I also remember sitting on the bus reading through the manual, and I remember sometimes I didn't quite read the manual, and then I'd look back many, many, many days later and find something that I should have read and known that would have made the game so much easier. But it is what it is. But there used to be a map, or Zelda, I remember, had maps, pullouts, a place to write notes for cheat codes, like, for example. You don't get that anymore. So between the lack of the physical, the lack of the box, the lack of the disc, the lack of the cartridge, plus, a lot of the bug testing is done now by the players, like, for example, early access, or even from full games, you can still report bugs in the Steam Workshop, in the forum, sorry. The actual cost of going to market has gone down considerably for the big guys. It has given, like, small publishers a way into the industry, which is brilliant. That's good. But in terms of, like, the big publishers, they're still expecting 60, 80. I've even seen games on sale for like nearly 80. That's unheard. And now we're being forced to buy a copy per person. You can't transfer it. What if I want to lend a game to a friend just to try it? What if I want to sell the game? Because anything else I buy, if I go and buy a kettle, if I go and buy a toaster, if I go and buy a washing machine or a microwave, I can then choose in a month's time to sell it. Now, people do still do that with DVDs of films. It's perfectly legal to do. It's perfectly legal to do. There is no law in the world that states that you cannot sell on something that you've bought and you've enjoyed and you've done with it. And they've destroyed that. They've destroyed that. They've made it harder for young people to access games because they don't have money, and without a bunch of games to trade in that they got for Christmas 2 years ago, they can't buy the latest thing. So, and if you're in a poor family, well, what are you going to do? You're going to go out and rob people to get your fix? Because I know myself that there are some games that I look at and I go, I really want to play that, but I don't have the inhibitions of of a child anymore. I've grown up and I'm a bit more world wise, and also I've got an income, so I can actually go and buy my games. And I mean, like, there's okay, there is a refund policy if you don't like a game within a certain amount of time, both in time, game time, and time, you can return it. But I'm not being funny. Some of the games these days are 100 hours plus, easily per playthrough. So you're not really getting past the early game into the mid game, and the mid game is generally where most people find out whether they like the game or not. Because you're into the grind, you're out of the honeymoon phase, and now you're going to know, but you might be 20 hours in before you realize actually this game is really boring and it's really grindy. And while it was fun to start with, it's now hit a plateau. Mods are good to get around that, and most games nowadays, a lot of them sandboxy stuff, especially that you can kind of set your own settings and make it as easy or as difficult as you want. But still, there are games that are not like that, and you get to a certain point and you go, I wasted my money on this and there's nothing I can do about it. Whereas as consumers with anything else, there are certain checks and balances. So I think that it's a really worrying trend. The ease of access without having to go anywhere is good, but it's kind of given companies this illusion that they can make, like, let's you let's call it what it was, cyberpunk. They released an unfinished game and then they tried to fix it after release, and they've got this notion now that, well, once it's bought, that we can patch it after, it'll all be grand, don't have to worry. But back in the day, if a game was released and it was shite, people wouldn't buy it because the early adopters would buy it and they'd say how crap it was. And people who did like, and the games that were good, people held on to them and they didn't really go onto the second-hand market as much. Because I remember having to go back into town like a few times a week or on the way home from school or whatever to see if they had whatever game it was I was looking for, because it was a new release. I didn't have the money to buy it new. It wasn't in stock. So people who did have the money would go out and buy it because it wasn't secondhand. You couldn't get it secondhand. Now you have to. Okay, we've got sales. We have got some discount shops, and they're great. They are absolutely brilliant. And when they put on, like, RimWorld hasn't been on sale since it was released. One of my other bugbears with it is like, why do you think your game is so high and mighty? I've got games in my catalog that have not even seen my hard disk yet, that I could go be playing. Why am I going to spend the same amount or three times the amount on the game that I'm already kind of like? Uh, I like the content, don't get me wrong, but I believe it should have been in the base game. I'd be enjoying the base game a lot more if I had all that content. So I'd say personally that was an early access title that was released too early. And I say that because, and to this day, things like, Rim HUD and Just Ignore Me Passing, the hauling mods. There's so many that I can, off the top of my head, I can think of. I mean, even Dub's Bad Hygiene, having toilets and showers and stuff for a colony sim sounds like it would have been, you know, a part of the base game. And I've even said that before I even knew what mods were in the game were. I even said, why is there no toilets in this? Surely they need to go toilet. Anyway, let's stop hating on it. It's a good game. I like the game. I just don't want to pay €60 for it. Okay, moving on. We've touched on EA. We've touched on DLC. Well, I actually like the idea of cosmetic packs. So I don't like game-changing mechanics like Surviving Mars bringing out trains, which don't actually benefit on some maps, at least until later in the game. Like I'm nearly a year in and I still haven't used a single train yet. All it did was get in my way in the tech tree and make the game slightly harder without any real justification at that point. But anyway, I'm sure a lot of people think it's really cool. But this is a big studio. We're not talking about, a small guy here who are just trying to milk people. Now, another game that springs to mind is Prison Architect. Now, they took the game over from another company. They never really finished it. Like, you can't even choose what to put in stockpiles. The game's a buggy mess, and they keep releasing more DLC for it. Like, Timberborn, great game. Early access still. They've got the storage system down to a T. It's brilliant. They've got the construction priority system down to a T. It's brilliant. Things like Tropico, none of that. Things like Prison Architect, none of that. If you can't, if you've got a game that's based on volumes of things being moved, stored, used, you have to have fine levels of control. Another one I actually want to start playing again is Settlement Survival, and I've complained on their forums a few times that look, I want to be able to not just say I want food here. I want to be able to go down to the fine grain of saying what food I want there. They've got it kind of, but they haven't got it right. Then the priority system, I don't want normal and high and pause. I want very ultra low, low, normal, high, ultra high, and pause, please. So, yeah, going off the that's kind of going off the subject of DLC. For let's say space engineers. Now, I've recently bought that game. I started getting into it. I haven't really thrown myself into it yet. It's a very good game from what I have played, and I think it's got a lot of potential for me to play anyway, and even for the game to evolve. The DLC, I did buy all the DLC in the sale. It's all cosmetic. The reason I bought it all is because it's cosmetic. Because I think the way that games should be is like Minecraft, for example. The game is the game, and it's been 10 years, and if you paid 20 whatevers back in the day, you've still got the same game today that you had 10 years ago. As someone who's literally just bought it now, that is the gold standard for video game models. They're still making money, so much so that Microsoft actually took them over. And I'm not going to talk about that because I haven't been playing enough recently of Minecraft to know whether that's been a good thing or a bad thing for the game. But at least Mojang still got the majority of the creative control, I think. I have heard rumblings that since Microsoft has taken over, that things have been wrong, but that happens with all of them. I mean, look at EA taking the Command and Conquer series. Command and Conquer 4 Generals was an absolute deep show of a game. I mean, the social stigmas it was playing into, it was basically racism. Now, I'm sure yourself and many of other listeners will agree that there's every time a big game studio takes over a small game publisher, they essentially ruin the genre. Um, and that's if it doesn't get ruined like Mass Effect, when they just kind of go, right, we need to end this. Let's just slap something crap on. There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than carbon copies of a tried and tested technique a long time ago that worked, that is now really old and boring, but it's got the same name, so it's got the same price tag, and expect people to buy it. And people unfortunately do, because they're gullible. I don't like the lazy. Okay, well, we're bored of this now. Let's just get it finished and over and done with. You know, there's got to be balance in all things, and unfortunately, so often with the game industry, there is none. It's like anything good gets gobbled up by crap. So yeah, I think DLC shouldn't be game altering. Now, something like game expanding, like, I don't know, Skyrim, for example, where you have new isles and okay, there was something to do with a tower that was a bit overpowered and stuff like that. But you're talking end game content. Like, if it's end game content, if it's an expansion of the story, if it's an expansion of the game world, and it doesn't interfere with the mechanics of the original game, sure, why not? You've worked hard to make the expansion. You've worked hard to this. You're not just adding a train. You're not just adding like one small mechanic, which all the people who've already bought the game now have to pay for to get the full experience. City Skylines being the horrible one of like, if you look at that game and you look at SimCity 4, let's say, most of what's in City Skylines is just a much better version of SimCity 4. But now, in its entirety, it is. In its base game, it's lacking the majority of the content it needs to be even a competitor for SimCity. Let's face it. So, in my opinion, yeah, cosmetic stuff's a good thing. They need to make money, do that. Servers stuff like Minecraft has done, and they cosmetic stuff as well, fine. Although one thing I will say about the cosmetic stuff in Minecraft is with Bedrock, you have to buy stuff. You can't just download a skin like you can in Java. That's wrong. That's completely wrong. Everyone should be able to download from skin directory, whatever it's called. Doesn't matter what platform they're on. If they want to then buy royalty paid for Batmans or whatever's, that I can understand and wholeheartedly agree with, because fine. But the thing is, DLC and loot boxes, which is another thing I'll come to. There's a lot of European consumer groups who are crying out for loot boxes to be banned because it is, same as DLC, predatory. It's predatory. The industry is essentially preying on young people to nag their parents. Can I have this? 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 Oh, all right, just to shut you up. Or again, they might turn to other means to get the money to get the things that they want. It wouldn't be unknown of. So it's a predatory system that's preying on the youngest in society. And the loot boxes have been called gambling for a good reason, because they are, you know, and you plow a lot of money into games. I will not play, and sorry, Dead Meme, I know you have and you don't have a problem with them. I will never play a free to play game. I tried them once or twice back when they were on the phones. Like, most mobile games are basically free to play interactive adverts. That's what I call them, interactive adverts, because all they're doing is trying to sell you, oh, you need so many Simbucks or so many gold coins or so many diamonds or so many blah blah blahs to unlock the next tier of your city blah blah garage blah blah whatever it is blah blah. And if you don't, then you've got to grind for literally weeks to get to that point that other people are paying to get to. Is pay to win. And now that, I'm not even talking about competitive games. Like, I mean, there was one that a friend of mine, her mum, who's in her 80s, 90s, was playing. It's like Elvenar. It's basically a city builder, but it there's no ingenuity. It's trying to work out the most effective way to press buttons for an imaginary. It's like, as a gamer, a true gamer of 30 plus years, ish, well, 30 ish, 30, yeah, 30 years, let's say, I know and understand the challenge of a game. And I'm talking about platformers, racers, RPGs, and I now settled on city builders and logistics kind of things. That's what my heart is into at the moment. I'm not so much into the reactions of first person shooters, platformers, etc. Each to their own. I understand the joy of beating a level. I understand the joy of making something in a game that has creative potential. I understand the joy of beating the scenario that you're in, but tapping gold coins and pressing buttons, and they monetize it. They monetize it through this. They've got the currency that you're allowed by pressing buttons. You've got your materials you're allowed, and then you've got this super currency, and you can get bigger city quicker by paying. And you know, this is a 80, 90-year-old woman playing. no doubt she's probably going to be putting in a few quid a month, which is ridiculous, you know? It's predatory. Like, and unfortunately, yeah, there are a lot of people who are buying into this. Like, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm with you on this, Dead Meme, you buy a game, it's a game. You've got it. As far as I'm concerned, DLC is an expansion. Sure, if you're editing the mechanics of the game, just make another game. Now, something going back to the generation that we're from. Split screen gaming has disappeared, all but disappeared. There's a few games. I mean, Ninja and Clash of Carrots. If anyone has any younger players in their household or their friends, cousins, family, and you're looking for something to play multiplayer, you can have one person on keyboard and mouse, one person on control pad or two control pads, whatever, on PC. Ninja and Clash of Carrots, brilliant game, very child friendly, good humor, and actually quite challenging. It took me a few goes to finally beat the end boss, and I've not aced. I'm not a completionist. I'm not going to go for gold on every level, but I remember Split Screen GoldenEye and the jabbing each other in the arm, the the joy of it, and Smash Brothers and all the rest of it. Now it's all online. You're in separate houses, and that's great. I don't. That's good to be able to do that, but it shouldn't be the primary way to multiplayer. Multiplayer should still be about couch multiplayer, split screen gaming or same screen gaming, co-op modes, that kind of thing. It's a huge hole, and it's missing from the industry right now. Um, okay. Anything else I can think of in relation to replying to Dead Meme? Except for to say that I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiment that the industry is becoming more and more toxic, and we are buying into this culture of you don't buy a complete game, you buy a game that says it's complete, but you're going to get more DLC that you're going to have to pay for. No, let's what Mojang did, and everyone gets updates, and everyone has the same game and is playing the same game. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are, you experience the same game. They then make their money through merchandise, through servers that are dedicated, through certain cosmetic packs that you can't get anywhere else, through that kind of thing, or having your name in the game, or that kind of thing. Yes, make it optional, make it a choice, make it something that someone's spent the money on your game. Don't go changing the mechanics on them unless it's early access and that's what they're expecting. Or if you're going to bring out a new game and say it's RimWorld 2 or something, because, it's so different to the original that it might as well be a new game. But yeah, I don't know how we get the youth to realize the nonsense they're buying into, because obviously we're from a different generation. We remember what it's like to have a full game out of the box that worked, and it was play tested. It had no bugs. It didn't need patches. It didn't have all this DLC to come out for it. And when it was time and the game had made enough money, if it had been well received, it would have had another one. So yeah, I'd say I agree with a lot of the sentiments you made. I just don't know how we're going to get from where we are now to where we need to be. Again, like Steam, Valve has a lot of the market covered, but what happens if they go broke? What happens to our access to our games? These should be our games. I should be able to give them to my friends, to my cousins if I want to. Like this, we shouldn't be locked into this single thing. And if people would just stop buying the loot boxes, stop buying the DLCs that don't make sense. Like again, I'm for cosmetic. Other people might think it's a silly Dead Meme. You said it was kind of silly. I think it's a good thing that they can make money, but City Skylines, all of them DLCs should be as part of the original base games, and then they can make pretty things that they then sell as DLC. That's my opinion. That's the only kind of thing I think I differ on with you there. And obviously, I don't like free to play because it's too much of a grind, and it's made that way on purpose to make you spend money. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it there now. I'm probably repeating myself. I will link Dead Meme Gaming's video that I'm replying to down in the description, and go over there, take a look. He's good channel. I like his videos. Um, and I will be uploading. The next station is probably tomorrow, maybe, hopefully, depends on. It's taking a long time to edit. Let's just say that because there's a lot. I was in the time between basically the last 7 days of uploads have all been stuff that was pre-made, and in that time there's a lot more footage that needs to be gone through. So I want to keep it relevant, I want to keep it fun. I'm assuming that a lot of the people watching my content are probably players themselves. This next video is the kind of thing that if you've been playing for 100 hours you'll get everything that's going on. If you've been playing for 20 hours you'll follow along. If you're new, then you might struggle to see the minutiae of what's happening, but at least you'll see the shape of the base change and everything. So, but that's to come. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take it easy. Bye for now.